In today's video, I'm going to be reviewing the Supermatic Carbons and comparing them to the regular Supermatics. I'll let you know how they feel and how they ride. We'll get into the key physical differences between the two bindings, and then we'll finish up with who each binding is for and whether it's really worth the upgrade for the Carbons. Nidecker sent me a pair of Supermatics when they first came out a few years back, and I've got to say I was pleasantly surprised. So much so that I still ride them now. They work, that's been established, and if you want to watch my initial review or even my follow-up review, then I'll link those down below. Everything I've said in those videos still stands, and although no major changes have been made to the Supermatic since then, small upgrades here and there have noticeably improved performance. Little things like the lever didn't used to release that easily if you were, say, balanced on your toe edge, but as you can see with the newer ones, there's no issues there. I've put a lot of time into these bindings, probably more than anyone else. They're great for me when I'm filming videos, and you often see me popping in and out of them. But when I saw the Carbons, honestly, I wasn't that interested. I thought they looked really cool. I love this high back design, but I find the Supermatics responsive enough. And I just thought with all that carbon, these things are just gonna be too stiff, they're gonna be uncomfortable and really not that fun to ride. But as you can obviously see, Nidecker sent me a pair anyway, and I was swapping between these and my usual pair on my most recent filming trip to Switzerland. A lot of you have already spotted these on my feet on my Instagram posts, and now I feel like I've really spent enough time on them that I can give you a good review of them and properly compare the two against each other. Now, to be clear, Nidecker did send me these bindings, but this is not a paid review or anything like that. I don't normally do gear reviews, but given the hype around these bindings and the fact that I've spent so much time on the regular Supermatics, it just makes sense for me to make this video. So I'm going to slide off out of screen, and I just want to let this clip run because I believe it really well illustrates the point that I'm about to make. This was my very first run on the Carbon Supermatics. It was my first run of the day, and we weren't even supposed to be filming just yet. I normally wait until the sun hits the slope before the camera comes out. So this is just me getting warmed up and feeling the bindings out. And the reason that I want to highlight that is because from the very get-go, from this very first run, these bindings really impressed me. Any ideas I had about how they might perform, about them being overly stiff, uncomfortable, or just too aggressive to be a fun ride, turned out to be completely ill-founded. And when I've ridden really stiff bindings before, I've never really liked them. You don't always get great board feel, and you can just be really aware that you've got a solid plate underfoot. And it almost feels like a barrier between you and the snowboard. But with these, I didn't have that sensation. I felt really connected to the board, and the response I was getting edge to edge was just amazing. I had the same board with the regular Supermatics on just the day before, but all of a sudden it felt completely different. It was like the board had been upgraded. I wanted to ride harder and faster, and I was trusting my edges to hold at higher speeds and on steeper slopes. In short, they just filled me with more confidence. And actually, I still wasn't riding great at this point. It was still early on in the season here, about my 5th day back. Yeah, get all your excuses in while you can, but you might notice how my edge changes from heels to toes weren't quite right. But these bindings didn't care. They were just like, nah, we're carving this. Don't worry, we got you, you're locked in. And that was surprising for me because my preconception was that they were just going to punish me for any mistakes I made, whereas all they did was inspire confidence. On top of this, my feet weren't hurting, which again is something I've had with stiffer bindings in the past. And actually, in terms of comfort, when strapped in, I couldn't really notice any difference between these and the normal Supermatics. It's only when you put your foot on the gas that you then notice the difference. So in terms of how they feel and how they ride compared to the normal Supermatics, well, it's more responsive, sure, but not too twitchy, and they're going to encourage a harder and more aggressive style of riding. So now let's take a look at both these bindings to see exactly what it is within the Carbon version that leads to all these performance upgrades, besides obviously just a lot more carbon. So here we have the Carbon Supermatics, and here we have the regular version. And looking at the two bindings, you can see that they obviously share a lot of the same design features. They work in exactly the same way. You release your foot by the lever on the side, and then when you push your foot in, it clicks you in like that. So let's have a look at what's the same and what's different. The The design of the base plate is exactly the same. Moving on up, the straps over the top, again, have the same design, but we've got a stiffer TPU compound on the carbon Supermatics that once again is going to give you that stiffer feeling binding. Underneath, as you can see on the regular Supermatics, you can see right through the straps here. It's just that TPU that you slide in on. But on the carbon Supermatics, they've upgraded that slightly, and we've got a Lycra lining on the inside here that's going to allow your foot to slip in a little bit easier. And once your foot's in, it rests on the canted footbeds that are the same on both the bindings. However, in the carbon version, again, we've got a little bit of carbon on top of the skid plate that just helps you slide in. Basically, what you're going to notice is on the carbon version, wherever there can be carbon, there is, including in these buckles. And this is one of the big differences between the two bindings. So on the regular Supermatics, let me just undo this. When you want to lock it in, you have to kind of crank this down as you would a normal binding, and then when you've got it in place, you just push this button down and then it's locked in place. It's not going to move anywhere. Whereas on the carbon Supermatics, it functions much more like just a normal binding ratchet, that you're used to. You just slide it in, it's going to click in like that, it's going to auto lock, but then you get to this point where it won't move here, so you keep ratcheting it in. But these LSR 2.0 buckles, they're called, they have an auto-locking feature in both directions without having to push any button down or anything like that. So these are now set, they're not going to move, they're not going to come undone, and once you set them around your boot, you really don't have to touch them. But if you are someone who likes to crank down a little bit from run to run, you absolutely can quite easily with these, and you can adjust them on the fly, really smooth, and make a great sound when you ratchet them. And if you're used to a normal binding, there's really not going to be any difference when you come to these, but they're just going to lock you in. Now, it's not to say that the buckles on the regular Supermatics are awkward, but they're just slightly different, and the carbons are going to bring that new upgrade that we'll probably see coming into future versions. We'll have to wait for that though. Now, on to one of the main differences between these two bindings. So let's take a look at the high back. I forgot what it was called for a minute there. And one of the first things you'll probably do in the shop is you kind of grab this high back, tweak it, and you can clearly see there's a bit more flex on the regular Supermatic binding. It cups to the back of your boot really nicely and it holds you in well, and you can adjust your forward lean simply by sliding this up or down as you like on the fly. Whereas if we look at the carbon version, we've clearly got a different design here. We've got this really cool futuristic looking design, and you might be wondering how I get in to adjust the forward lean. So that does have to be done with a tool on the front here. You have to get a screwdriver in on that and then you set it. So if you're someone that likes to kind of change your forward lean a lot throughout the day, maybe this isn't the best option, but that's not me. And once these are set, these work really well, and it gives you this more minimalist design, and it allows you to have this kind of stiffer high back, which first thing I did was try and move this, and there's really not much give to it, and that's what made me think, oh, these are going to be stiff and horrible. But actually, as I said, once I was riding them, really comfortable, really responsive, and just feels really nice. So those are your two big differences between the Supermatic Carbons and the regular Supermatics. So are my Supermatics done, retired? Well, not so fast. Sure, the carbon version are better at riding harder and more aggressively, but the normal Supermatics were no slouch in that department either, and their main advantage is that they're just a more usable binding across the entire mountain for any riding style in any conditions. And for most people who want a step-in binding, they probably don't need the performance benefits that come from the carbon version. But if you're in that smaller percentage of being a really solid rider who wants a really responsive binding, but you also want that step-in functionality, then yes, absolutely, the carbon Supermatics are for you. And the good news is both work and both work well. So try not to spend too much time deliberating between the two. I don't think there's much more to say than that. Now, I shot a lot of B-roll of both of these bindings in actions, so we'll finish with a little montage of that. Now, for all of you who are going to comment that step-in bindings are for kooks, jerrys and punters, well, here's three things. Firstly, nobody has a problem with you using regular bindings, and they aren't going anywhere anytime soon. Secondly, we should applaud innovation within the snowboard industry, and this product is only helping more people get into snowboarding, which can only be a good thing. And thirdly, it is products like this that bring money into snowboarding, that then allows brands like Nidecker to support awesome video projects like Torstein Hogmo's new movie Return that looks absolutely insane. Basically, if you want to see your favorite riders in more epic shred flicks, then don't get so triggered about someone wearing a pair of Supermatics.